Hello, I am Paula Bennett and welcome to my podcast, Ask Me Anything. I've gone through plenty of ups and downs in my life and have learnt quite a lot along the way, but now that I've got midlife crisis reinvention under my belt, I know it's never too late to learn something new. That's why on this podcast, I'm going to be talking to Kiwis from all walks of life to hear about how they got to where they are and get some advice and guidance on some of life's biggest questions. My guest today is someone I spent a lot of time with in my role as police minister, including a trip overseas in a squealing pig, which I might talk about shortly. Former Police Commissioner Mike Bush spent over 40 years in the New Zealand Police Force. Over that time, he held many different jobs, including 6 years in the top job. All that experience has given Mike a great understanding of crime and law enforcement. So he joins me today with some advice on tackling crime and how we raise our young people. Hi, Mike. How are you?
Greetings, kia ora, Paula. Lovely to be here.
I still slightly want to call you Commissioner. Because that's what you do when you're in those roles, isn't it?
And I want to call you Minister, so we're all even.
You sort of go by title. It's quite a funny one. Okay, bit of housekeeping to get out of the way. 2 rules for this chat. First is I am allowed to ask you anything, but you don't have to answer it, because that should be life's rule, I think. The second is that we do no judgment, no judgy on this one.
That sounds like a Bill of Rights caution.
Yeah, it should be, eh? Okay, icebreaker questions to break us in. Favourite book when you were a child, or a movie or something like that that you distinctly remember?
Absolutely. So when I was a very young lad, my dad gave me the biography of Charles Upham VC in Bar, which was a great read, and a lot of insights into that. But I've got a few other favourite books as well. So everyone will know Ben Alton. Yep. Brilliant author, comedian. So he wrote a book called First Casualty, which I recommend to everyone as a great read. And then there's another book by Viktor Frankl, psychologist, which is around the meaning of life. Oh. So anyone asks me about books, they're always the 3 I recommend. Reason being, how people learn through adversity, develop courage. And
there's a bit of humour in there.
Well, there certainly is with Ben Alton. That First Casualty has everything.
Yeah. Okay, I love the recommendations, and I think that there'll be people out there that'll be listening that'll be interested. So do you sing karaoke?
I have tried. For 4 years I was based in Asia for the New Zealand Police. You can't escape karaoke.
No, you can't.
But I was probably one of the only law enforcement officers that was actually encouraged to leave the stage.
Really? So did you ever go to song?
No. I tried a few.
Yeah. They just love it though, eh?
They do, and they're good at it.
Yeah, they are.
You know, if you go to the Philippines, Thailand, Korea.
So you've sort of touched on it a little bit there with the book choice, but you're known for your leadership. Who is a leader that you have admired or someone that you respect, past or present? Yeah,
I've looked at a lot of corporate leaders, sports leaders. You know, there's a host of them that you turn to for different things. And I've had leadership mentors in my life, again, both from the corporate, commercial area, from the sporting arena. I don't want to name them because at the risk of offending people that I've missed out. But I think everyone needs a range of mentors to help them develop their leadership. And, of course, leadership comes in many forms. So, reach out, get people you admire and just ask them, because people are only too happy to share their experiences and learnings. And that's the great thing about leaders. They want to develop other leaders.
Yeah. So, look, the first part of the podcast is getting to know you a little bit better, and we've started by talking about leadership. And like one of your styles, and you've talked about it in the past, is where you kind of have a plan, you know where you're heading, and then how you bring people with you. And from your perspective as police commissioner, in such a huge role, and you had, literally over 10,000 officers that were there, and they needed to kind of know where you were heading and want to be part of it. And that was part of your style, was that kind of persuasion, I think, and being quite articulate in what you were trying to do. And I suppose from being all those years on the beat yourself, you could relate to them.
Absolutely. They're very kind of you to say those very nice things. And you've nailed it in one of your comments there that when you lead an organisation or a group of people, you've got to be able to paint the destination. People have got to know where they're going, where the landing area is. What are we here to achieve? What are the outcomes we're looking for? So you've got to be clear on that. You've got to set those things for those people. But how do you bring them on that journey? How do you encourage people, enable them, support them? And you can do it in many forms, but nothing beats actually getting out there, talking to people, one-on-one, groups. You've got to immerse yourself in that organisation and that business. And you've got to be able to listen, that trendy term of active listening.
Yeah.
So it's not one way. And for me, leadership is all about your relevance. And what I always thought about in the New Zealand Police is I can't lead these people unless I understand the environment they work in. So how do I get down there and understand, work with them, listen to them, understand the environment they work in? Because policing evolves.
Yeah, well, you went in 1978.
78, I joined the New Zealand
Yeah.
Police. It's a heck of a lot different now than it was then. Some things remain the same. Other things have changed enormously.
Yeah.
But to understand the environment that our people work in and then apply that to all the decisions you make, the things you do, and how you encourage and enable people to be their very best they can be, and that's what they want to be. How do you do that as a leader?
And I just want to touch on something that you mentioned then, which is the changes in the police force that we've seen over the decades. And in my mind, some of them have been quite extreme. And hey, they needed to happen, and you'd be the first to admit that as well. More women in police, better understanding of domestic violence and how we help and work with victims. Certainly, we've got a much more diverse police force than we've ever had. Can I ask the question, though, when we look at what you think is the same? As you were saying that, I was just thinking it is that bond that our officers have and their desire to give back to this country and make a difference, really. Is that true?
Yeah, two things in that. So there's the camaraderie you talk about, which is really important. Policing's a team sport. You've got to look after each other.
And trust each other, right?
Got to trust each other, look after each other, but you've also got to hold each other to account. Because police have got to be the most best behaved role models in society. So we hold each other to account. So if you get camaraderie wrong, it can be a little dangerous.
Yeah.
It's got to be the right healthy culture, the right behaviours, and supporting each other to do the right thing. And it's also a very dangerous profession. You've got to have each other's back. But when it comes to doing the right thing, making sure that you trust each other and you trust each other to make sure we do the right things is really critical to a great police service, which is what the New Zealand Police have.
And is that part of that challenge was working out how to do that when you do have now so many different ethnicities? And we do think differently, right? We come from different backgrounds. We're all a sum of the parts of who we are and our upbringing and where we're at. And with all respect, it was probably a bit easier when you recognised that person that you were looking at in the uniform as well. Whereas now we've got such a wonderfully diverse police force that camaraderie and that trust and that communication between each other must have had to have evolved over time.
Yeah, absolutely. So if I go back 40-something years to when I first joined the police, we joined for the right reasons, to be there for the public, do the right things. But our relationship with the public of New Zealand wasn't as good as it could have been, not with the entire public. And parts of community we were at war with. So what we have to understand is why policing exists. We are actually there for all of the community. So we must represent them. We must look like them. That's why diversity and inclusion is really important.
Yeah.
And then we've got to do the right thing by them. So if you're understanding the purpose of policing again, it's to ensure that communities, people not only are safe, but they feel safe. And they feel safe because they trust their police.
Yeah. No, look, you were one of a number of amazing people that have done amazing work, but that change from prosecution to prevention, and as we can even see today, there's still so much more work to be done, right? And you can see some of these families and young people that are so disengaged from what we would think of modern society, but kind of we've got to go a bit back down to the fundamentals and acknowledge that some of it's really intergenerational and been happening for decades when you look at it.
Yeah, and it's very complex. And again, you mentioned a really interesting thing about prevention. So there's really 4 things that the police are there to do. They're to prevent crime and harm. They're there to respond to calls for service. They're there to investigate where crimes have occurred. And they're there to resolve things like the prosecution. And the reason we brought in the prevention first operating model was to make sure we got the order right. All of those things are important, and you've got to be good at all of them. But if you get the order right and the investment right, the investment at the front, you make a big difference for the rest of it. So prevention is about understanding the drivers of crime and partnering with others, having intelligence to get in front of it.
Yeah.
Because, if you're reading what's happening in the newspapers these days, there's a lot going on and everyone's got a view on how to resolve it. But understanding the complexities of what's happening in our communities and getting in front of that is really, really important to changing that criminal environment.
Yeah, it is. Really, really hard. You have led us through some of our toughest times, the Christchurch terror attacks, Pakati White Island eruption, Kaikoura earthquakes. Oh, it feels like the list is just so big, isn't it? So what's it like leading police at a time when people perhaps are at their most unexpectedly vulnerable?
Well, it's a heck of a challenge, but it's also, I would say, an honour to be in a position to lead an organisation in those crises. So if I think about all of the tragedies that you've referenced there, the one thing in common is that there were people at the heart of that. There were victims, 51 victims in Christchurch, our worst tragedy on record.
And fear throughout the whole country.
And it was right throughout the country. Whakaare, victims who died in a really horrific way. And other tragedies I've been involved in. I was one of the first officials on the scene in Thailand after the Asian tsunami. And again, just in that small area, 5,500 victims and their families. So to be in a position to lead your organisation to respond is a real privilege. But it does ignite in you, what are you here for? What are the important things? How do you respond to crisis like that? And what do you personally bring to that situation? And that's what you think about as a leader.
Yeah.
What's required of me? What do we need to do? Defence Force would say, what effect do we have to give to this mission? What's going on, understanding the environment and getting out in front of it to give reassurance to the public, but also to the victims of those tragedies.
And that's what I was going to say, quite genuinely thank you, because it does, when we see our police at times like that, it does reassure us and it does make us feel better. And, I visited different mosques throughout the country, not in Christchurch, and just seeing police there with them, you could see the relief, of the people that were there on their faces so that they could go about their prayers and their grief. And I just think that, you and I are a bit biased. We always think we've got the best police force in the world. So,
well, we do.
Yeah, we do. Oh, good. That wasn't even a question, was it?
It's because we do.
Yeah, well, it's because we do. So, Mike, you left the role, 2 years ago? Am I right?
Yes.
Yes. 2 years ago. Look, we know how much you love police. Do you miss it after all those years?
I get asked that question a lot, and the answer is yes, absolutely. And what I miss, first off, is the people. And secondly, the mission. What we're there for.
Yeah.
And that's a very honourable mission. But going back to the people, I can't speak highly enough of the people in the New Zealand Police.
And mission, you also mean purpose, eh? Like each day.
That's exactly what I mean.
Yeah.
We're there for a very important reason, and that's to keep our communities safe. I mentioned before, not just keep them safe, but ensure they feel safe.
Yeah.
And that's something that New Zealanders hold dear. So I miss that part, the purpose, the mission. But the people are extraordinary. And I look and I watch them and I talk to them and I see them every day and what they go through.
Yeah.
So what they're expected to do, the risks they're expected to take, the decisions they make day and night, and they get about 99% of them right. And quite rightly, when we don't get it right, we've got to be accountable.
Yeah.
But how often we get that right in respect of everyone and the courage that they show. And you mentioned Christchurch before and the courage that not just the New Zealand Police showed on that day, but all the emergency services and members of the public was beyond description.
Yeah.
And I've spoken to those two police officers that everyone knows, Jim and Scott, that arrested that person. And they agreed themselves to put their own lives on the line to make sure that happened and that no one else was injured.
Wow.
Two men with families putting themselves for the community to ensure that he didn't commit any more harm.
Yeah.
And I just take my hat off. And I know that just about everyone in the New Zealand Police, given that same circumstance, would do the same thing. So to be associated with those great people is an absolute privilege.
Yeah, it is. It is. Pretty tough, though, when you've been at the top job, that, you know, and quite rightly, it can't go on forever because change is good for an organisation as well. But, yeah, what do you do next? And you've left a job that you loved, but you've got your own company now and you're doing some consultancy. And
I have, and that's really interesting, real change. You'd know exactly what I'm talking about here, of course.
Yeah, I know change.
Yeah, so you go from a job like that. So I went into the COVID operations lead straight out of the New Zealand Police role, and I've found that a really interesting role. It was like a startup. But I've got to say, I also found it the most frustrating thing I've ever been involved in. So I'm actually quite happy to go out and do my own thing now.
Yeah.
So I have a consultancy firm called Bush International Consulting, work with a lot of wonderful clients that I won't mention because, you know, I don't want to favour one against the other, and this is not an advertising forum, obviously. But I work with a lot of great people who are doing a lot of great things. And it's great to be able to share my experiences with them.
I'm going to ask you something left field. Are police getting younger or am I just getting a lot older?
You know what? We've been told this for a very long time. When we think police officers are getting young, it's a sign and a message to us.
Yes, it is.
I
knew the answer to that.
Yeah. I'm the patron of the current recruit wing, Wing 360. Want to give them a shout out. Awesome people. But I look at them and go, wow, it's great that so many young people want to join the New Zealand Police.
Do they look at you and say he should get a haircut? He's quite let his hair get a bit longer, ladies and gentlemen.
They may do, but they're far too polite to say.
Hey, before we move on to the advice part, I was going to touch a little bit when I mentioned it in the intro of that relationship between a minister and the police commissioner, because it's a different one than most other portfolios actually, because in general a minister can be quite directive towards their chief executive, and I don't know, a great example would be some of the changes I made in welfare. It was like, well, actually this is what we're going to do. I'd like advice and you can tell me the best way to go about it, but I've kind of made, and yet it's quite a different relationship with a minister and their commissioner, in that you quite rightly have an independence of decision making.
Yeah. The statutes are quite clear that a police commissioner must be responsible for obvious reasons.
I can't go and arrest that person.
Yeah, exactly. So you must have political independence from the police. That's why the commissioner must have the operational independence, but it's around operational decisions. And of course, the government are responsible for policy, they're responsible for the investment, the funding, etc.
Yeah.
So the important thing in that relationship, as I'm sure we agree, is just having that open and honest dialogue and understanding where the minister and the commissioner are coming from.
Yeah. So I was thinking I'm going to give you my version of this story, and I wonder if your recollection is the same, because it's quite funny when two people are in a situation whether or not they do remember the same. And I haven't practiced this for anyone that's listening, so I'm surprising Mike with this one. So we were in the Solomon Islands together. You, of course, as police commissioner, and our police officers had been there for quite some years helping with training, and they were coming out. And there we were, do you remember, we were on the stage and Mike was resplendent in uniform and we were all showing the due respect, and it was a stadium, and there were just, literally a couple of thousand people there. You've got cameras all looking at you and everything else. And my recollection of this is I'm sitting there and I'm sitting next to you, and you looked straight ahead and your lips barely moved, but you said, "Minister, can I suggest that you avert your eyes? But there's nothing I can do about the sound, sorry." As they dragged a pig in front of me out of respect and slaughtered it in front of me for us to have dinner that night. Is that your recollection?
Pretty much.
Yes.
I mean, we have to respect others' cultures, obviously. But it was... I kind of knew what was coming.
Yeah, I hadn't seen it, you see. So when I kind of got this avert my eyes and I looked over, I thought, right, game face on and let's...
yeah, it was one of those more interesting moments.
Yeah. Show a degree of respect. But I was very grateful for the pre-warning.
Yeah, well, I didn't know if it was something you were familiar with or not.
Yeah, I mean, it's not something you expect every day, is it?
No.
But as you say, respecting differences, and it's a sign of respect from them. So we are going to have to take a break now. When we come back, we'll launch into some advice around how we might look after some of our young people, including, I think I'd like to also ask you a bit about what we should personally do to intervene if we're seeing crime happen, whether it's you or whether it's happening to someone else. Right, time to launch into some advice, Mike. As we've heard, you have had so much experience in law enforcement. So I want to get some advice from you now around how we might tackle some of that crime, how we might or might not get involved, and how we might raise our own young people, grandchildren, or try and influence others. So first, let's offer some advice to parents who will go through the normal ups and downs of parenting and actually want to raise law-abiding, well-achieving adults. I know that I've got now grandchildren that I watch and I think, well, I've got an influence on them, so how do I use it for good? And I was talking to you earlier, I just remember when my own daughter was about 13 or 14, she's got my genes, so she had a slightly naughty gene in there as well, and I could see she was going to, try and push a few boundaries, but she's a good girl and we've done well. Anyway, a police officer friend of mine said, "What advice have you got?" And he said to me, "You're going to get one chance. She's going to make a mistake and she's going to ring you, and how you react to that will actually determine whether she rings you next time." And sure enough, a year or two later, lied to me, said she was staying at the friend's place, and I got the phone call at 1 a.m. that she's in a party in South Auckland, doesn't feel comfortable and doesn't know how to get home, and will I go and get her? And the whole ride out there, I was so angry until I remembered his words and went, this is my shot. If I yell at her, she'll never call me again.
Great advice.
Yeah.
And obviously it worked.
Yeah, it did.
I mean, what you've got on your side is you're a caring, loving parent.
Yeah, but we all still think we're going to get it wrong.
That's right. And we all want to get it right.
Yeah, we do.
And even if you don't get it right, it's not fatal.
No.
But as long as we've got to be there for our young people.
Yeah.
Right? We've got to be there for our children. And they don't always want to talk to you.
Yeah.
It's when they do, you've got to get it right.
So if, I'm making these up, right? So if my 15-year-old was driving a car with no licence and I heard about it, then would I then handle that myself? I mean, they've effectively broken the law, but actually they're a good kid that's made a mistake. Then am I better off just to kind of handle it myself, or can I go somewhere else and get advice? Or
you can do both. Our kids will always look to us as the first port of call for advice. So we should always be there for that. But there's always, as we know, it's a bit like other situations where people would much rather take advice from other people than either their parents or their partners.
Yeah.
And that's a good time to bring in someone else, someone who's been there and done that, whether it's a police officer or whether it's just a trusted uncle or friend, just to put things in context. And, I know from experience that really resonates. Sometimes we don't think it does, but just a few kind, wise words. And, I go back to my childhood. I'll never pretend I was the perfect child. And, one time when I was very, very young, I got in a little bit of trouble and the police officer came to my house and he gave me a lecture and I stood there at attention and didn't move while he gave me some advice.
Yeah.
And that advice resonates with me to today. And I think I was 9 years old, and it's something I will never forget. And that police officer will have no idea of the impact that police officer had on me and the advice. But he was clear, kind, and gave great advice. He didn't, he was standing 6'8" in his black uniform as it was in the day. Yeah. So he was in a position of authority. But the way that person handled themselves, it's quite a long time ago, so I'm not sure if he's still around.
Yeah.
Getting the right advice in the right fashion makes a huge difference to young people.
Yeah, it's scary out there though.
It is. I worry about young people who don't have anyone to keep them on the straight and narrow, who don't have good role models, who don't have the benefit of advice, and they're just left.
Yeah. If anything, it's the opposite for some, Mike.
Absolutely.
Do you know what I mean? Like they're encouraged to actually break the law and show no respect for authority.
Yeah. Well, I think about the roles that you've had, Minister of Police, Minister of Social Development, and some of the things you've seen in your life. You've seen those tragedies. As a country, we can't go on thinking that these young people who misbehave come from families the way we did. They come from tragedies, dysfunctionality. They haven't had love. They've had abuse. And I'm not making excuses for them because they've got to be accountable and there's got to be consequences to their actions.
Yeah.
But we've got to understand their environment and we've got to find better ways to address their behaviour.
Well, I mean, I remember LSV, the Limited Services Volunteers, and, mainly run by our Army and our Armed Forces, but equally police were involved as well. And I certainly remember turning up and the kid was about 18 and he just sort of came bounding up to me and it was the graduation and they go and they live in and they have just the role models and what these guys do. And he just came bounding up to me and he just sort of said, you're the minister, you're the minister, eh? And I was like, yeah, I am. And he goes, so you could help me? And I went, yeah, well, maybe, and he goes, can I stay? I don't want to go home. Please, this is the best thing that's ever happened to me in my life. Please don't make me go home. I remember being at one of the courses and talking to the kid and he was literally, police were being wonderful, but he was in trouble because he had been on this course, he'd then gone home and he literally stole a car to drive back because there was drugs in the house again, there was a party going on and he was trying to go down a different path and in his mind he did exactly the wrong thing, but you could actually understand where he was coming from. Home was unsafe.
Absolutely. I was a patron of one of those LSV wings and they are fantastic. And I had the same experience at the graduation. A lot of those young people said to all of us, is there anything you can do to ensure we don't go home? Because we know if we go back to our home environment, it's not necessarily their family or whānau, it's their friends and their associates and their neighbourhoods.
Yeah.
They said, we know we're going to get back in trouble for exactly the same thing. Can you take us out of that environment? And there were employers there that were putting these young people into employment. That's one of the solutions. Take them out of that environment, put them in a new environment where they're constructive, they're away from those influences. And so I take my hat off to programs like that. And I take my hat off to people who will take a risk and put these young people into employment. And that's what they need.
It's hard though, Mike. What advice do you give us, because some of us get really angry with them? Well, like the ram raids that we're seeing now, the lack of respect and authority, and it feels like it's happening more and more. And, I know that I'm sort of playing both sides here at the moment, and I do get the backgrounds, but for some it also feels like we're just constantly making excuses for them. And so it's hard for us sometimes as adults when we're literally quite scared of them.
Yeah. So I look at that problem and I agree that there needs to be far more accountability for their behaviour, far more consequence, and there doesn't appear to be. And again, understanding that environment because it's a bit of a carrot and stick situation. Again, understanding that environment. So I've spoken in another role I've been doing, spoken to these young people who've been committing these offences. And the common theme that comes through, so I said, well, one of the things that I asked about was, so what do you do with the property? Well, we've got people lined up with the readies, the cash, to pay for these great items. Whether it's jewelry, whether it's fashion items, they are stealing to order. Yeah. Because there are criminals in our communities who are cashed up ready to do this. We know who they are. They're gangsters. They are these outlaw motorcycle clubs who have more Louis Vuitton and Versace than most people, who have cash because they sell methamphetamine and they drive so much other crime. So these young people have a ready market. That's not the only component to this, but it's one of the important ones because they know that cash is going to be there in their hand within an hour of those ram raids.
Wow. So that real work that's going on with gangs and interrupting their activity that we have seen for years, quite frankly, and I'm reluctant even to say started under you because certainly we saw that, even pre-you, that some fantastic work was going on and it keeps evolving and changing as it should. But that interrupting gangs is
dismantling. Yeah. And any idiot who says they're okay, we've got to better understand them, is not really understanding the harm that comes from them. Yes, I understand the drivers into gang behaviour, and that's another thing that should be addressed, and we did our best to address it back in the day. But, we can't pretend there's anything good about gangs and organised crime.
No. But I mentioned before that advice for us that are feeling, at times quite intimidated and fearful. And I many years ago now, put myself in the middle of a group of youth that were fighting and separated them and managed to calm it down while police got there. And then I was reading just the other day about a woman who chased someone out of a supermarket as she was stealing a trolley full of groceries. And I can't help but thinking, from a personal perspective, I don't think I would intervene again. And then for that woman, I was like, well, you literally, are you putting yourself at risk for a trolley of groceries? I can understand when it's definitely, you're potentially stopping someone from harming someone, and we've seen that in the past of people intervening in a supermarket when someone was randomly stabbing someone, and it's like, well, whatever you can do. But what advice would you give people as far as intervening when they're seeing crime happening?
You'll always get the advice that don't intervene. As a member of the public, probably not safe to intervene, but we have human nature. We all want to make a difference. Doesn't matter what our walk of life is. We want to get involved and stop people from being hurt or things from being stolen. My advice is just the same as yours, really. If it's property stuff, don't risk your life and well-being to stop something like that. Do what you can, video it, record it, watch as much as you can.
So watch as much as you can. So you might remember what they're wearing. You might try and remember the number plate of the car that they're hopping into.
Absolutely. Direction of travel, just what they're wearing, all those sorts of things. If you can video them without them being seen, might just be the track shoes they're wearing, might be enough evidence to identify them later in a court case, anything they're wearing.
And your adrenaline might be going at that point.
Yeah, the phone might be a bit shaky while you're
So you might also, if you might also be the time when you literally type it into your phone if you haven't been able to record or something, like those details, because you may forget, the adrenaline's pumping, and we're not trained police, so we might forget. There's some great studies, isn't there, on do I know that you're wearing a blue shirt, or if you ask me later, we might argue about what colour.
Someone should be ringing 111
yes,
at the same time, or someone else is just recording, watching, and passing that advice to the police as soon as possible.
Okay.
But when we talk about personal harm, and we've seen incidents in central Auckland where people have intervened to do the right thing and they've died as a result.
Yeah.
So the advice is to be very careful, and the advice I would give is, A, understand the context of what you're going into, and B, understand your own capability. So be wise before being brave. If you can intervene, I remember there was a stabbing incident on the North Shore some months ago, and members of the public intervened and they did detain them, and probably the right thing to do. But then there are other examples when people have lost their lives. So if I saw, I live on the North Shore and not far from a robbery of a jewellery shop, and I think to myself, what would I do if I was walking past? I know what I would do. But it may not be the right thing to do because we always want to do that right thing.
Yeah.
But understand your own capability and understand the context before you make any rash decision.
Well, look, I once was literally door knocking because that's one of those stupid things that politicians do. I was knocking on the door and this woman came to the door. She would be the most drugged out person I've ever seen. You know, I don't think I'd ever been so physically confronted by it. And it was obviously meth and it was, it was almost, and I looked down and there were kids' toys there. And in my head, I was like, oh my goodness, I have to get social workers. Like she was just absolutely, her eyes were rolling in the back of her head. Anyway, she recognised me and she called me some names and then went, you took my children, right? Which meant that Child, Youth and Family at that point had taken her children. And I must admit in my head, I went, thank goodness those children are safe and not in this house. And then she sort of started lunging for me. Now, this is where I'd love to tell you how tough and brave I am. I ran like you've never seen anyone run in your life.
Brilliant.
It was the right thing to do.
It's the right thing.
I tell you what, there was no way I was going to be able to reason with her. And I just felt with that level of drugs, there was no way I was going to physically match her. And the best thing I could do for everyone involved was just get the heck out of there. And I ran.
Wise decision. Wise decision.
Yeah, even though the adrenaline's going a bit and everyone wants to save everyone, it is actually take stock and think really carefully about, as you say, the physical, the product, not who cares, but who cares, right? And then equally, not everyone has to be a hero.
Absolutely. Extreme example, but, this is what we teach our police officers. And it was an example in Northland where our police officers were under fire in the middle of the night. So they had a decision to stand there and return fire or take one step to the left and stand behind their patrol car and take cover.
Yeah.
They took that decision, the right, wise decision.
Yeah.
And it was a good outcome in the end. Everyone lived. But those decisions.
Yeah. How do we encourage people to take policing as a career? I mean, you know, it's pretty dangerous, some of the examples you've given us, and we unfortunately know the statistics of domestic violence in this country, and it's a hard job. You know, we're seeing job shortages everywhere and everyone's competing for the same people. Why would you tell someone to join the police force?
It's probably for the same reasons I joined. A, it's such a worthwhile purpose, great vocation in life. And it's really, really interesting. You virtually do have the best stories at any dinner party. It's hard to be beaten on the story front.
Yeah.
But you really are giving something back to the community. But you want to make sure that people who are thinking about joining the New Zealand Police understand the risks, because I've personally seen the results of those dangers, and you've just got to be aware.
Yeah.
My daughter is very keen to join the New Zealand Police, but she's eyes wide open.
Yeah.
And I support her in that because it's a great vocation.
Yeah. Well, we need her and we need them. And as I say, certainly from my experience, I've just never known a more dedicated and better group of people that, we should all be very grateful for.
Yeah, we should be very proud of our police.
Yes, we should. Okay, Mike, we're going to change tack. The podcast is called Ask Me Anything. So this is where you get to ask me something. So do you have anything that you'd like to ask me?
I had a couple of questions. One we've kind of covered, which was that transition that you had from a very high-profile role into sort of life-changing. So we've kind of covered that. One question I want to ask you, if you go back to some of your previous portfolios as minister, I think politicians become politicians because they want to do the right thing, but you can't always. Was there anything in your career that you were really affected by, but were really frustrated because you couldn't bring change?
Oh, it's a big question, isn't it? Yeah, and sometimes it's just the timing. So it's not even you might be ready, but society might not quite be ready for that particular change. I loved when marriage equality went through, for example, you know what I mean? Like, I just it never made any logical sense to me that who you loved and how you loved them and each to their own and you go for it and it should be, love should be celebrated. So then you go, well, why didn't you do it? You were in a position where you could have passed a law like that. And I suppose it just gets down to so much happening and it being the right kind of person in the right time in all respect. So there's certainly some of those changes that were just, in my opinion, we were well overdue and ready for them. And you can find it kind of frustrating. I tell you what, I'm thinking as I talk as well, adoption laws. I think they are archaic. I looked at them about 3 times while I was there and how do you modernise them? And then every time I did, it just looked like such a big job, to be really frank with you, and kind of a can of worms, and there were other things that took priority, and I'd get as much frustrated with myself that I wasn't doing something.
Thank you.
So there you go. Okay, our final segment is called Zip It, Sweetie. So this is where we get to vent on something or someone that has kind of killed our buzz this week. Would you like to go first? Have you got anything that you want to say Zip It, Sweetie to?
I call it COVID fog. And I think it's resting over all of us. And how do we move on from that? I see it in people's moods and makeup. We've got a lot of frustrations, a lot of challenges in the world, economic situation, war in the Ukraine and Russia. But I think there's a lot of people suffering from COVID fog and understanding the impact of those changes in our life, whether they be on your business or on your household or whatever. How do we move on from that? And I just think it's a real mindset thing. And I just like to see all of us pick ourselves up and move on from that COVID situation we found ourselves in.
Yeah, and the way it's divided us a bit.
All of that.
Yeah. It's time that we moved on and time we sort of found the next. My Zip It, Sweetie, is just because it's topical with you here as well, Mike, is that just the other day, and I've watched the video, some guy with a hammer came up and smashed the big front glass doors of where I work down in Wynyard Quarter. And so I turned up on Sunday morning. I'd love to say because I'm diligent and was going to work, but actually I was leaving my car there so I could go fishing. And here was glass everywhere. And we had a security guard inside because the alarms had gone off and that sort of thing. And you watch the video and there's just no rhyme or reason for it. He didn't even step into the building. So I can't even tell you it's a ram raid because it was just but he literally stands there with a hammer and thinks about it. So he's ruined my buzz because it's going to take us days to get it fixed. And so we've got wood up there. And then our receptionist and our wonderful staff there is kind of looking all perplexed and not feeling too good about it. That's life, isn't it?
I think you went up me there.
Well, only because it's just so relevant and just happened, really. Thank you so much for joining me to chat today, Mike. I really do appreciate your insight, and it's been absolutely fascinating to talk about your time in the police force. Thanks for coming in. Thanks for talking to those that are listening, because I know that I got a lot out of it. And that is another episode of Ask Me Anything done and dusted. You can get in touch with me by emailing paula.bennett@nzherald.co.nz. Please feel free to send through your questions for the podcast or any thoughts you have. You can also find me on Facebook, Instagram or LinkedIn. Make sure you follow Ask Me Anything on iHeartRadio or wherever you get your podcasts. You can also read my weekly column in the Herald on Sunday. I'm Paula Bennett. Ask Me Anything. Goodbye.